Hey everyone, this is Dan. In this video, we're going to be painting some more of the generative art watercolor pen plots. They end up looking like this. And what we're doing is we're using P5JS to draw the image initially. We're taking that SVG to the Cameo, plotting it using a pen, and then we're coming in afterwards and painting it with watercolor. So let's head over to the computer and get started.
The process for the painting starts at the text editor. So I have a couple of scripts in P5JS, and what I do is I go through variations of these, and that's sort of what I'm doing here in the picture. And ultimately, there's not a great plan behind this. Really, what I'm doing is I'm just drawing some shapes, drawing some lines, using curved vertexes. I'm trying to see what I like or what looks good. And in some cases, the variation you see there, the shape is not being closed. And so what you end up with is these, open shapes, whereas some of these that you're seeing now, these actually have a closed end on the shape. And so it, connects back, and that gives you a filled body to create a painting around. And I just iterate through a bunch of different versions of these until I find something that I like, and then I take them to the plotter. Once I have a few shapes I like, I export the paths as SVG paths, and then I use those to draw the shapes using the plotter. And that's what you see happening here. I have a couple of different pages going, and I just switch them out as I go from shape to shape. Once everything's plotted out, you start to get into the actual painting part of things, and that's always a lot of fun. It's always great to see the color come in and see how the watercolor overlays and looks different, with the different types of opacity. In this particular case, I didn't tape these pieces of paper down to any sort of a surface, and I learned that wasn't a great idea. I ended up with some warping in the paper, but that's, sort of how you learn things, is you just kind of make mistakes as you go. But what I do is I just sort of go through and look for colors that I like, and I'm kind of looking for organic or natural type colors, and I start with lighter watercolors first and then darken over time, and in some cases, do a little bit of mixing of the colors and just try to get different effects and different variations. For this video, I was painting two of these different paintings as I went, and one of the things you notice is right there I'm pulling off some tape, and I wanted to experiment on some of these open shapes with creating a hard edge. And it seems sort of odd to have a hard edge with watercolor because some of the benefit of it is that it's able to run into other colors and it looks really natural and organic. But I thought it would be interesting to have that hard edge, and also it just kind of mirrored the pen plot itself. But all I'm using there to create that hard edge is scotch tape. And for some of the other sides here, what I'm doing is I'm using the line itself to create the hard edge, because it's really difficult to cut a piece of tape to match that line. And so there are definitely some imperfections. The colors kind of run into each other in places, and what I am doing is I'm letting things dry in between different colors, and in doing that I'm kind of minimizing some of that running together. One of the things I also found is that it was relatively easy to come back and clean up some of those edges, and you might not think that was the case with watercolor, that it would be hard to come back and clean up, but it was actually pretty straightforward and pretty simple to do. So later in this process, what happens is I come back in and I kind of clean these up as a last step in the paintings. One of the things I noticed is I kind of got further along in these. I frequently would start with a lighter color, a yellow, and then I might darken that a little bit with an orange or a red. But the further along I got in the painting, I started to notice that I didn't have any foresight when I was choosing the colors. I was just kind of choosing them as I went, and it actually became more difficult to kind of figure out what color should be next, if you will. I don't know if planning the painting would necessarily make that better. One of the challenges it makes it seems like to me anyway, that it's a little bit less fun if I have to plan out the colors in advance and know exactly what I'm going to use. The reality is half the time the colors end up looking relatively similar from painting to painting. And I think some of that is just that you tend to develop a palette of colors that you like and you use them over and over again, and your paintings start to look similar. And I think that there's some level of comfort that you come to with the colors that you're using, and you kind of get used to seeing how things look next to each other and what feels right to you or what comes naturally. And this is just sort of a good exercise in exploring that. Once you get closer to the end of these paintings, you kind of end up in a situation where you have to make some choices. When you plot these things out, it draws a bunch of lines, and when you draw the images on the computer, every one of the images has fill. But once I take these to watercolor and I start turning them into actual paintings, I found that I like to leave some of these shapes open, or I don't paint, or I don't close every one of the shapes. So you'll notice once we get closer to the end here that some of these lines they don't ever get filled up. You just kind of leave them as some additional detail, and they kind of act as an accent to the piece instead of being a filled shape.